so great to have you here on a Sunday night. We're super excited to have our friend Gunnar Brammer here tonight to do some tying. Hey, Gunnar, how's it going, bud?
It's going all right. Welcome to Masters of the Fly.
And
thank you.
David, where are you tonight?
Well, I am down in the Bahamas in a wonderful little island called Aikland, and there's 8 of us here having fun.
Awesome. I guess you're fishing, huh?
Yeah. Oh, look, there I am. I wonder how that got up there. Yeah, we're fishing for bonefish and had a couple of permits swim by earlier today.
Sweet. Everyone's doing well. The fishing's been okay.
We're doing well. Fishing's okay. We're having, the moon's playing some tricks on us, but we're okay.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome. And I know, David, your connection there is a little bit questionable, so we'll get you as long as we can. And if it drops out, we understand. But thanks for being here.
That's right. And before I forget, Lou, this is very important. While they still last, some of you have received these already. And if you want to get a Masters of the Fly bumper sticker, don't hesitate to send us an email with your name and address, please. And additionally, Lou, this is a shameless plug. Don't forget to download the greatest new app in fishing to hit the streets in like forever, called Got One.
Now, thank you. Yep, Got One on the App Store and Google Play, especially for all of you who are starting the season and want to start logging your catches. Would love your feedback. We just launched it, and as we've told you in previous broadcasts, so please go out.
Does that record location and share it with your friends?
It only lets you as the angler see the location, and then you can choose whether.
But it is recorded. That's scary.
It is recorded. It is recorded. That doesn't get shared past you.
That's mental only, man.
Less than a 15-mile increment. So we try to pick good spots. So that's a Got One app for all who are interested in testing it out. We love your feedback. Meanwhile, Eric, our other Masters of the Fly partner, is in Ireland tonight, so unfortunately he's not with us. And but we're really excited to have Tom and Clay here as usual, helping us behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Captain Tom Kaczynski had quite the day today. Tom, what were you up to today?
Hey Lou, thanks. Yeah, we've been fishing in Raritan Bay. It's been consistent for a couple weeks now, but starting to see some bigger fish with more consistency. And I was lucky enough to get a head-on shot with a 35-pounder yesterday on a Hollow Fleye that was singling out bunker. So put it on its nose and it ate, and it was a really good day. And there's been a lot of other fish that are obviously not all this big, but a couple bigger ones hanging around. Some are leaving and heading east and north and up to spawn, but more are also trickling in every day. So it's been a really good start so far.
That's
and
awesome.
It's all logged on the Got One app, which has been really helpful.
That's a career fish there too. I'm glad you tagged it on Got One, so you have that for posterity. And
that's awesome.
Congrats, man.
Thank you.
And actually, great segue, because tonight we're talking to Gunnar, who is, as I hope most of you know, one of the true innovators today in tying flies in general, but in particular, big flies for big fish. And as Tom said, right now, particularly for those of us in the Northeast, big menhaden patterns, bunker patterns are the ticket to catching a career fish. So hopefully tonight you take some tips away with you, so when you get on the vise, you tie that fly to get that lifetime fish. Anyway, Gunnar, dude, great to have you.
No pressure.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm now responsible for your lifetime fish. What is that?
It only gets better, man.
That
Cheers. Well, thanks for being here. We've been trying to get you on this show for quite some time. We're huge fans of the work that you do. I think, David and I learned about you just through your incredible presence on social media, on YouTube, on Instagram, and just incredible flies and your video demonstrations that you've done. But actually, it was last season when we had kind of the dawn of saltwater fly tying, Bob Popovics on, and we had Johnny King and Jason Taylor with him, and we kind of asked him, like, well, who are the folks that you look at as the next generation of great tyers taking that tradition forward? And you were really the top of the list, so we knew we needed to get you on. So thank you for agreeing to be here tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's
and
obviously a huge honor, and that is a very humbling thing to hear from Bob.
So Gunnar, maybe tell us, and also for all of you on there, in case you see some cameo appearances, Gunnar is a proud father of 2 kids, one of whom is 3 months old. So when we first started talking about doing this, you were in a different world, right, man?
I was like, what's the date? What's the date you want to do this? That's really, 7 o'clock bedtime. You want to do this 3 months in bedtime? Sure, I'm here. Y'all owe my wife a big thank you. That's what I'm getting at.
What are your kids? How old are your kids now? So you've got.
So we'll have a soon-to-be 5-year-old. We'll have a 5-year-old named Hezekiah, and we have a 3-month-old named Malachi. And very 2 wild little boys.
Are they?
I'm going to keep them wild.
Yet?
Oh yeah, Hez has been time flies for. Oh man, where's this box? No. So I have literally gone through. Probably, I mean, no joke, probably $400 worth of time material in this box. And, for all my instructional videos, I just let them loose. I'm like, here, you want $5 of schlopping? Here you go. He's like, all right, I bet I can fit all that on one hook. Let's try it. I don't know. You just let him go. So, he's been time flies like a madman.
And Gunnar, I know that you are now you're in Duluth in Minnesota.
Duluth, Minnesota.
But you grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, fishing, right?
Yeah.
And how did you get into this whole fly tying, fly fishing thing to begin with?
Regrettably, because I just, if you saw my closet, you would know that's where most of my finances are. That's the only thing I'm getting at with the regrettably. So it's kind of a long story. And the short version is basically I didn't grow up fishing, which is kind of sad. My dad loves golf. And so like most fathers, he's like, I'm going to teach you how to golf. You want to learn how to golf? And as a kid, you're like, sure, I guess. I don't know what I like and don't like. So that was my childhood, golfing. And he had a business partner that ended up taking us to Canada. And it was kind of like a business partner thing, but we were also friends outside of that work relationship. And he brought his son, and we had gone to school together for forever. So, that was putting all of it together. Like I had never tied on a jig, put on a minnow, dropped it, set the hook. Like we had gone trolling a few times with family friends growing up. So like, I don't consider that fishing. Like the guy driving the boat's fishing, but not me. And so it's like the first time start to finish of catching a walleye, like the butterflies. It was just that a little adrenaline dump. It's like I hadn't experienced that in that setting. And it was like, as soon as I got home, I was like, this is something we need to do right now. Like I started fishing all the time. And it took about 3 years into that trip. My dad had brought a fly rod, which I knew nothing about, didn't even know he owned it. It's not like something I was grandfathered in. Like my dad's not like, hey, I'll teach you how to fly fish. No, it's like they go to Canada. The dads have this whole scheme. They're like, we're going to sneak off and go fishing by ourselves. Boys, you're old enough now. Why don't you take a boat by yourself? Right. So it went from father-son trip to dads having fun, kids getting lost, running into rocks, almost breaking out boards, like a bunch of shenanigans, right? Which is fine. It's fine. But the dads went and they caught a bunch of pike on topwater flies in lily pads, which I know nothing about. And of course, when you hear fly fishing, for the super ignorant, you're like, what do you, flies? Like house flies? Like, how does this work? Like, you don't know what mayflies are or stone flies or caddis, midget, none of it. You know nothing. You're like, how do you get a fish to eat a house fly? Please explain this to me. So they're start telling me back stories, like of pike trying to eat their frog imitations in the lily pad. And after 3 years, they had all caught pike. Why not? Because you're in Canada. There's pike everywhere. I hadn't caught a pike. Can you imagine in this group of 6 people being the only one who's pikeless? And most of them were like 35, 39, 43, like decent pike, like really exciting. And that was a pretty big blow to the ego. So as soon as we got home, I'm like, I need to learn how to fly fish. Most people do not like, I need to fly fish to catch pike. That's not the intuitive leap most people make, especially growing up fishing. But that's where I have come from.
Fascinating.
So it only makes sense that I tie big flies and I only streamer fish and I'm all in on warm water, pike, muskie, and bass. It's the whole evolution from where the motivation to learn it started, right?
Yeah.
And then,
Gunnar, do you go back to that same place in Canada?
I wish. Since kids, life has been crazy. As soon as they are old enough, like get in the truck, we're going. Because, and I get emails, from different lodges, and they're like, come here, you should check out our pike fishing. It's absolutely unbelievable. But it's like, I have these memories of just these kind of no-name lodges in Canada that were amazing people, beautiful place to go. And it's like, and I know that, like, we did it like 7 years in a row on one of them and probably 4 on the other. So like, I have these 2 lakes, 2 different lodges that I know like the back of my hand. And what was super cool is we did the same week every year. So it's like, if you put me in Canada, a lake in Canada, on the last week of June, I can catch every walleye in the lake. I don't care where you put me. It's like, you just show me a map and I'm like, I know where they are.
Fascinating.
That's like,
Great.
12 years of experience fishing the same style of water in the same week for 4 or 5 days straight. It'll teach you some stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you learned a lot that way. And I'm curious so a lot of folks on Masters of the Fly, not everybody, but a bunch are saltwater fishermen, particularly saltwater fly rodders. How did you find like the connection with the kind of stuff that Bob was doing in the salt? Was it just you were looking for the largest fly patterns that you could throw, or how did you make that connection?
So this would have been 2015, 2016. So I had just started commercial tying, right? So I started Brammer's Custom Flies in 2015, and I had come from the Kelly Gallup School of Thought and fly tying, and I had actually worked for Kelly for a year. So I had that kind of mentorship. All of the influence was articulated trout oriented. All the flies I fished for pike were in the articulated trout style. I would just tie big trout flies that I would fish for pike with 2 hooks. And I was just ignorant. I was super ignorant of what had been done before, right? Because you're a kid, you're ambitious, you think you know everything, well, you want to take on the world. You're just a dumb kid. And so I start making YouTube videos, and like you could find it. It's like, I just call it like a bucktail pike fly. I forget what I named it, but I basically did a bucktail deceiver with hackle tails and a craft for head. And I'm like, oh, why has nobody done this before? This is so obvious. This is such a great idea. And then it just like happens upon Facebook. I see this book called Fly Design. And I thought that was a pretty ambitious title, like fly design. Like, what do you mean fly design? Like, you're getting pretty nitty gritty and nerdy with the title fly design. So I was like, I got to read that because I'm sure there's stuff I don't know. Well, it turns out I knew nothing. Like, it turns out I literally, like, you had no idea how much you didn't know.
And this is Bob Popovics.
This is the School of Bob Pop bucktail work. Fly Design's the greatest fly tying book you can ever purchase. If you want to change your life right now and you're tying and you're fishing for the rest of your life, go buy that book. Stop this video, go buy that book. Fly Design. And fly is spelled Fleye, like fly. And so I'm just like reading this book, having tried to do some of this on my own, and of course failing miserably, and then having some success. And you're like, oh, I'm so smart. And then you read that book and it's just saturated with about 50 years of wisdom and truth and fact. And it's almost mind-boggling how deep it is for how fast you can read it and just how simple the sentences are. It's like there is some serious depth to that book that you could reread it 10 times and still be pulling out things you should be adding into your tying and different ways to manipulate it and apply it to the hook. It is truly, it was the book that revolutionized my tying and how I saw flies and how I built flies. So I have taken saltwater fly design and brought that to the Midwest for my bass, pike, and muskie, and have this weird hybridization of Popovics Gallup. And in between, I had this huge phase of Scandinavian, all the Swedish, all the Finnish guys, because they were pike guys. And pike is a pretty celebrated species over there. And so those guys have these like huge flashaboo flies that are like 12, 14 inches long for their bream and stuff. And so I'm this weird mix of all 3 of that. And that's what I bring to the Midwest for fishing.
Love that. David, did you want to ask something?
Well, I did, but we moved on so quick. But when you read Bob's book, was there one single thing that jumped out at you that just pulled you into the rest of it? Because it's a phenomenal book. I agree.
Yeah, I think it would be tips, and that might not make intuitive sense, but as far as You know, I think like in modern fly tying, a lot of people look to the game changer as far as action, and they see all the joints and all the shanks and how it's tapered to get it to swim. And if you look back, it's like you can get bulkheads and bucktail deceivers and hollow flies to swim that way with just a hook and then material trailing it, because of the way you build the bulk. You create that initial disturbance, and then you have nothing but tips from shoulder to tail. And of course, the coolest thing about bucktail is that it's a tapered fiber, right? So you have this big fat butt and this skinny little tip. You have volume control, you have all this bulk building capabilities, and then you have all of the life because there's no friction at the tip of it. So it captures all of the hydraulic disturbance that's going on. And it's able to flex and bend progressively, which is what we're going to get into with the whole hollow fly business. It truly captures, you know, the illusion of bulk. It's one of the only flies ever that truly captures the illusion of bulk, which lends itself to the greatest capacity for large size patterns that are castable, which is like, you know, a lot of people, if they see this video and they're like, oh, we're going to talk about big flies. Everybody's talking about big flies. What's the big deal with big flies? First of all, everybody seems to hate them as if they're this uncastable, unruly thing that nobody can really master. It's a pain in the butt. You're going to hurt your shoulder, hurt your wrist, hurt your elbow, all this stuff. It's like you have never cast a properly tied bucktail fly because you can cast it on a 5-weight. Like you can take a 12-inch beast, put it on a 5-weight and throw it 70 feet if you have some good casting skills. You put that on an 11-weight, you don't know it's there. It'll blow your mind, the capability of Bob's traditional beast. And the tip thing, it's like I started applying that to every pattern I taught. If you look at from like the moment I read that book till the rest of modern until now, like that whole time span, I have basically moved all of my patterns, which tended to be like almost action driven. Like I want it to behave a certain way, which is I find very freshwater mentality. And saltwater mentality is typically about accuracy and silhouette of forage. Like that is what the big thing is, because you have these mass migrations of bait fish that dictate what the predators eat. Like when you have millions of sandals, guess what? They're going to eat sandals. You need to be able to match that length and profile so that they know what the hell it is. Like it's pretty straightforward. You don't throw a bunker when they're on that, and you fish bunker when they're on bunker, and you need to know that kind of seasonal migration and when stuff is relevant. And so that accuracy of silhouette and then controlling exposed tips, right? Because the tips are what swim, the tips are what move, they're what capture kind of the energy, if you will, from the head. And that's what brings the fly to life. So from shoulder to tail, there's nothing but tips. So like when I started doing my triple sculpt daddies, it's nothing but marabou tips from top to bottom. And I have different props in there to prop it up. And so it's like you take it from bucktail and you apply it to marabou and fox and swimpish hair and nyack, like it doesn't matter. Ostrich, like Bob has a fly that's like a clouser, but it's tied with ostrich, and it's just nothing but tips from the shoulder to the tail. And if you could see that in water, it comes to life. You take a tapered material and you tie a tapered fly, you have something that'll truly swim, and it's really cool.
So Gunnar, let's get into it, man. We're super psyched to see what you do. And David and I are going to go off screen and let you take over, and we'll ask questions along the way. For everyone else, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. If you want to chat stuff, just stick it in the chat. Just make sure you select everyone so everyone can see what you're chatting. And let's have at it, Gunnar. David,
all right, Gunnar.
I go off screen.
We're gone.
Right,
Bye.
You're stuck with me. Good luck. I'll do my best here. But what I want to talk to you guys about tonight is basically Bob's Beast Fleye. It's probably the single most pattern that it's been the most influential on me as a muskie fisherman and as somebody who's really trying to achieve this large scale fly. And I kind of mentioned, you know, kind of people tend to poo-poo on the whole big fly scene for castability reasons. And also you get the people who are like, hey, you know, I've caught 150-pound tarpon on a 4-inch fly. And it kind of goes back to the forage availability and what's in and what's creating and influencing a predator's search image, literally what they're kind of comparing what they see to what they know to be there and prevalent. It's easier to keep track of one thing to try to keep track of everything. And fish are opportunistic, and sometimes you get lucky. But if you want constant success, if you want predictability, if you want to be able to be consistent, the closer you are to matching the real deal, the more it's in your favor, right? Because fish have to eat to live. If you can be as close to reality as possible, it's going to fool them more times than not. So it's not a case of curiosity kills the cat. And the beast is getting as close as you can get to a truly large scale fly, to a truly large scale forage fish, and having it swim and look and have the appearance, the silhouette, and the movement of a real fish, and yet it's castable. Now, in the muskie realm, because I'm in the Midwest, you have to understand so many muskie fisheries are dominated by like one predator, one prey. And of course, they eat everything. They're opportunistic all the way across the board. But your river muskies love a good sucker. And of course, there's a bunch of suckers, right? You have your hognose and your white suckers and your red horse and your silver red horse, and maybe there's carp in there. So they can eat a lot of things, and stone rollers and fall fish and chubs. But all of those fish occupy the same niche within a river. They're all big, 8, 10, 12, 14 inches, although it's 16, 18, 20 inches, right? And muskie exist at this density level that allows them to get huge so they don't compete with each other, and they eat the largest prey available. That's the whole niche they occupy. That's the niche that's left, right? Because you have all of your hammer handles and your small little pike and your largemouth and your smallmouth and your walleye. You have all these mid-level, mid-tier predators that are eating all the smaller forage, and muskie are smart enough to know we can just get big and then we can eat anything. So there's a very unique outside pressure source on why muskies eat big things. And you can find your shallow water Wisconsin lakes where they typically relate to perch, which can be in that 8, 9, 10-inch class. And you have your open deep water lakes where they typically relate to tulipy, which is basically a cisco or a herring or a whitefish. It could be literally all of those or one of them. And so then you have suspending fish that are eating 10, 12, 13, 14-inch bait. And so the thing that's kind of like across the board, and there's some seasonal variability, just kind of like in the salt world, but you're seeing 8, 10, 12, 14-inch forage as the primary food source. So if you're like, hey, I want to start muskie fishing, like, yeah, you could catch a muskie on a 5-inch bulkhead. Of course you could. You could catch a muskie on a 6-inch Hollow Fleye. And the technique I'm going to show you applies across the board to your bucktail deceivers and your bulkheads and your Hollow Flies at getting them extended past the length of your bucktail. So this isn't super hard on the beast, but what the beast is essentially is taking a Hollow Flye, which I'll break down the Hollow Flye. I'll explain what it is. I'll go over the technique, but it's taking a Hollow Flye and extending the body. So this is super old school style train of thought, but back in the day before there was articulated flies and kind of like tandem flies, there was just extended body flies, right? If you have a hook, you can only tie on the hook shank. But if you can put something behind the hook that you can tie on, you can extend the body of the fly. You can make the fly bigger. You can match larger profile forage. So Bob took, he had extended body bucktail deceivers. He had extended body bulkheads. He started developing the Hollow Flye, which was revolutionary for what it is. He's like, what if we extended it? What if we made it bigger? And it's the greatest casting, large profile, best swimming fly, all of the above. It truly has a special place in my heart. So I'm going to turn on my tying camera real quick and make sure that's all rigged up and ready to go. I want to show you something truly special. This was a gift from Bob himself, and it is a Bob Popovics original Beast Fleye. So this is something that Bob gave me at the Edison show in New Jersey, the fly fishing show at Edison in 2018. And this is it. This is, a 12-inch, 11-inch fly. It's all hollow tied, which I'll go over that real quick. And the body is extended on hard monofilament. The craziest thing about this, the most mind-blowing thing about this, is that you have to do the hollow ties in hand. You have to tie this in hand. It's the coolest thing, but just take a minute it's the coolest thing.
That's beautiful, Gunnar. Gorgeous.
It's one of my most fun. I would stroke it to death, but it's like I keep it very safe and try not to beat it up. But so let's just go over bucktail real quick, because the pattern's unique to bucktail, and bucktail, in my opinion, is the most unique, the most special, and the greatest tying resource we will ever have. I don't think anything will ever top it. So hopefully you can see this. This is a fly rod tip to a Blue Halo Retroflex 3 5-weight. This is bucktail right here. Bucktail is a tapered fiber inherently as a natural fiber coming off a deer's tail. It's tapered, literally has a fat butt, has a super skinny, wispy tip. And if you tie it in, the best thing about it is it has this hollow compressible tail section, right? So right where you trim it off the hide, the closest to the hide it is, and of course, kind of at the bottom, we'll go over hair selection here in a second, but it's hollow. And so when you tie it in, the hair will flare up a little bit. As the water hits it, it'll bend and swim. You get the swim out of the tip. Just like that, you get all the tips fluttering, but you have the bulk building, water pushing capabilities, volume generating of a hollow hair system that's semi-rigid. But it's not fully rigid because it's tapered, right? Now, Bob had this cool idea, totally revolutionary. What if you tied it in backwards? What if you made it go straight up with thread and then slicked it back a little bit? Now, look how much volume you were able to generate and how much leverage is on that tip, how much swimming action you could get that would capture the distortion from my big, bulky head. Like, picture that. And the coolest thing about this, when it gets wet, that's your casting profile. If you've ever taken a bucktail fly, got it soaking wet and pulled it out of the water, that hollow angle will kind of collapse down, which means you have little to no air resistance on the pattern. As soon as it hits the water, it loses the kind of gravity sucking in the water, cohesion, tension stuff that's, you know, water, hydrogen bonds and all that garbage, whatever. As soon as it hits the water, you get this big full fly that pulses every time you strip it, sending this kind of hydraulic wave down the fly that all the tips marry with and accentuate. So it's a completely mind-blowing idea to take bucktail, tie it in backwards, stick that sucker straight up, and then let the hair bend and flex under the pressure of the water and capture the distortion from the head. So that's hollow tying in essence. Flip it backwards, and you take this natural tapered material and you basically maximize its potential as far as swim and the illusion of bulk. And that's where the Beast becomes so special to me, and it's in its castability, really, because musky fishing, if you know, everybody calls it the fish of 10,000 casts. It's an infuriating sport to get into and to be a part of and to practice consistently because it's a lot of casting. And I can tell you right now, if you aren't a good caster, fly fishing sucks. If you're new to casting big flies and heavy lines and 11 weights and shooting heads, fly casting usually sucks. If you're chasing a fish that you then have to blind cast to for 7, 8, 9 hours a day, trying to rack up to just not even 10,000 casts, but 10,000 productive casts at a decent length without fly following, without hooking on weeds, it sucks. If you add all three together, forget it. Nobody's going to musky fish. As soon as you take the castability issue out of the equation, now you're free to kind of like enjoy and immerse yourself in this hunt, if you will, this one-on-one relationship with this top tier predator, because your whole experience isn't getting pooped on by the big fly parade. And so the Beast, it makes fishing for me fun. This hollow fly technique makes fishing fun. But I had mentioned to you guys how Bob extended the body of this fly with monofilament. That's the traditional approach. In fact, tying on mono is so kind of out there, it's so technical, he wasn't even going to put it in the book. He's like, this might be too much. You know, people are going to see that and be like, forget it, I ain't doing that, that's garbage. And in reality, that's exactly what I did. I saw that and I said, nope. But luckily, it was 2016. I was like, I'll just use shanks, right? You can just use shanks. I knew there was other options for extending fly bodies. Now, it comes back kind of full circle because in 2022, I guess this would have been last winter's tying season, I took it upon myself to learn how to tie with mono in hand, not because of necessarily the advantages, but because I just wanted to experience that in my tying and my skill set.
Hey, Gunnar, you used that term a couple of times. So just so people understand, when you say mono in hand, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I'm going to show you because I want people, so this video is essentially going to move into a solution that I call the Build a Beast, right? So I'm going to present to you how to tie the Beast Fly without any of the headache, with all the skills that you already possess if you can hollow tie, which I'm going to teach you how to hollow tie. So you won't have anything holding you back from generating any length fly using extended body tying after this video. Thank you, Leanne, because now everybody's oriented to where I'm trying to get to. So let me show you how to tie with mono in hand. It'll be like a 1-minute demonstration, and afterwards you're gonna wanna pour yourself a whiskey on my behalf because it's pretty brutal. So let's back this out best we can. We'll take Bob's glorious beast out of the vise. So over in the salt world, you guys have this stuff called basically hard monofilament, and it's straight. It's got no memory. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got no memory. You can just take it and boil it and rearrange all the molecules and cold shock it. But this is 60-pound heavy, hard mono. It's made by a company called Perlon. It's called Perlon Hard Monofilament Leader Material. You would literally take your monofilament tying thread. You would hold the monofilament in hand, get your thread started, and you start whipping around this bobbin, and you lay down a thread base like that. And you're gonna go all the way down and all the way back. This is a crazy technical skill to develop to be able to do this. And if you wanna try it, I have some videos that kind of break it down and how to approach it. But you're literally gonna, rest this in your vise. Normally this would be kicked up at an angle, but for this video, it doesn't really matter. Let me tighten this real quick. So you'd rest that in your vise. You'd get your hair, you'd cut it off. You would take it out, you'd hold the hair on the mono, pull out your thread, tie in hand a little bit, whip it around, tie down the butts. You'd have to hollow tie the butts using this technique. Does everybody understand how literally insane that is as far as kind of
it's like trying to do thread wraps on a limp hook that doesn't actually bend, so you can't put it in the vise.
It's crazy, right? And so Bob wasn't going to put it in the book. He's like, nobody's going to do that. That's ridiculous. But thank the Lord he did, because it has basically changed my view on fly tying. I think it's totally kind of revolutionized kind of modern musky fishing as far as techniques and extended bodies and hollow flies and beast, the essence of what a beast is. So going back to solutions that don't involve tying with mono in hand. The first one I had ever seen was by a Finnish tyer named Jari Koski, and he does a tube beast. So you take, the tube fly world for basically your salmon, Atlantic salmon, and all your West Coast stuff. And you tie on like, a 5-inch section of tube, and then you just run that through with mono. Right, that was the first solution I ever saw, and we're going to do a variation of that. Then you have shanks, right? You can extend the body with shanks, like in the Blaine chocolate style. Now, Blaine does it differently. A beast is not a bucktail game changer. When you look at Bob Popovics' technique layout, it uses full-length bucktail from tail to head. You're always using the bucktail at full length, irrelevant of where it is in the fly, irrelevant of the shank length, right? So Chocolate's game changer is basically broken down to shank length and material length match each other as the fly progresses from short shanks to long to a hook, right? And so it's kind of the direct opposite of that, using bucktail at its full length, which is super critical if you go back to the fact that it's tapered. So if you take bucktail and you cut it here, you try to get rid of it, you try to make it shorter, you've lost the bulk building, the rigidity, the volume, you lose the taper. You really have to be very intentional about selecting the right length hair for the application and the fly so that you maximize the taper of that material. You're never going to take long hair and cut it short.
And Gunnar, if people were to cut down the bucktail, they would also lose the action at the tips, wouldn't they, on a shorter, stiffer piece of bucktail? Yeah.
If you want to tie a small fly, you got to find small bucktail. You just have to. And so those are kind of your three solutions, right? You have mono, you have tubes, and you have shanks. And what you see with all of them is that if you make a mistake, because what you're going to do is you start tying the stuff in hand, you start manipulating this bucktail on shanks. If you mess one up, you messed them all up. And it doesn't have to be that severe of a consequence, but there's no way to go in and fix it. There's no way to go back. And so when I saw Jari's, the Finnish tyer, when I saw his tube extended beast, I immediately thought, well, why not cut the tubes into individual sections? each section would contain its own tie. Could be a straight tie for bucktail deceivers and extended body bulkheads. It could be a hollow tie for extending the beast. And it allows you, if you look at this tail that I kind of have pre-done, it allows you to just take them off. Oh, there's a hollow section. Here's two more hollow sections on two little pieces there. Here's another hollow section. Here's another straight section, right? And so I've built the tail section of this fly one step at a time, and I tied it on a tube. And the tubes are cut to kind of Popovics length of about a 1/2 inch. I tend to run maybe on the 3/4 side, somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 as far as the distance of my tubes between one another. Now check this out. If you were to mess up the spacing, if these tubes were to be too far apart from each other, you can just cut them, you just thread them off and cut them a bit shorter. If they're too close, you just pull them off and put a little spacer in there. It could be another little section of tube. It could be a glass bead. It doesn't matter. If you have a fly that is literally destroyed and mangled to pieces, you can just cut the tail off and thread it onto a new piece of mono. If you don't like one section at all, you just take it off, tie a new replacement, put it back on. Now, of course, once you tie this to your hook or to your shank, it's set in stone unless you're going to tie it onto a new fly system. But until this is tied onto a hook or a shank, it's 100% completely modular from the moment you start to the moment you finish. And because you're tying on a tube, you're tying in your vise, you don't have to learn any new skills like tying in hand. So it adapts itself to basically being welcoming to get anybody into tying a Beast Fleye. And because you can mess it up and fix it, you literally don't have an excuse not to do it perfectly. To the best of your ability. If you have a mistake, man, that it doesn't matter. You just go back and try again. You can infinitely learn from your mistakes and craft the perfect tail as long as you want, as many sections as you want. Now, the way I like to do this is you take monofilament. This is the same mono that Bob ties on. It's the Perlon hard monofilament leader material. You tie an overhand knot into it that stops the tubes from sliding off. And it's that simple. You don't really have to problem solve. Now, you do need to know the diameter of the mono, the diameter, the inner tube diameter of your tubes, right? So they fit. The things need to fit together, but 30-pound fits the HMH small rigid tubes, which is what I like to use. You probably can't see that. It's probably overexposed, but that's what I like to use. And then you take these tube sections, which I'm about to tie one, and break down the Hollow Fleye technique for you. Of course, I can't see now that comes down to it. And you just thread that on. So as far as tying a bucktail deceiver, you got 4-inch hair and you want to tie 6-inch fly, you do 2 sections of this, put it back behind the hook, you're good to go. And now you have monofilament, which isn't going to foul, but you still have the swimmability of tapered bucktail. So you don't have to necessarily build this craft a whole game changer to kind of get a really proper, excellent swimming fly. You're trusting the taper of the hair to do that for you, and you have a fly that will not foul. Now, when you get to muskie and pike, there's a lot of concern with teeth. And of course, you can line this now with anything. Before, if you were tying in hand, man, you were tying on mono. But I can line this through with nylon-coated stainless steel, with nickel titanium wire if you want to do a stinger hook. If you want crazy movement, maybe you're fishing bucket mouths, you can do it with braid, any sort of high-end braid. You can line that with braid so it's super limp and has no rigidity. Of course, you might have to stiffen it so it doesn't follow, but these are your problems to solve. I have found that the mono is perfectly suitable for pike or muskie, especially, and I think the 30-pound is 28 thousandths of an inch, so it's pretty close to like 50-pound. But the Perlon hard monofilament is kind of oversized. So, you get into a size range where there's no tension on this, there's no pressure on this. They can't come and cut it like a knife. It doesn't quite work that way because it's not taut. It just has loose material on it, and they bite it and it can flex and move and bend around their mouth. They don't just come up and bite it off. This is also something that I've adapted from Yari because he's put hundreds of fish on these long tube beasts, and he runs it with 50-pound mono or floral. I forget which mono or floral, but he's never had one break off, ever. And if he has, he's had one. I forget which. It's either none or one, but he's put a lot of fish on it with no problems. And I've put some fish on it with no problem. So that's how simple it is. This one's rigged up. That's the one we're going to tie. Let me get some tube sections here and build this fly back up real quick. and then I'm going to show you guys how to hollow tie. We'll finish this tail section, and we'll tie a beast. We'll finish a beast so that by the end of this video, you'll know how to extend the body. You'll know all the tube stuff, and you'll know the Hollow Fleye technique. So there should be nothing stopping you from crafting any length fly in a symmetrical 300-degree silhouette from 6 inches to 14 to 16 to whatever the heck you want to tie. And it's going to be castable and swim like a machine. So let's jump to the time camera here and get going. Oh, there we go. All right, so I'll get you guys zoomed in as close as I can here. I'm going to put a tube fly adapter. Now, of course, you don't have to use any specific adapter. There's a bunch of different adapters on the market. They're all going to work. This one happens to be made by HMH to go with my HMH. So it's a kind of nice, really nice system here. I have HMH's small rigid tube cut to about a 1/2 inch in length, and that is slid onto a tapered needle, which fits right in there. I'm going to grab the tool with the chuck system so that the tube can't move, it can't fall out, it can't rotate or twist under my thread pressure. The needle keeps it rigid. They are small, rigid tubes. That is kind of something that is important. You can get some pretty soft tubes, which you want to watch out for, because your thread pressure, because we're going to be tying some pretty serious meat here, will just deform the crap out of this. You'll stuck it onto your needle so hard that you'll never get it off. So just something to pay attention about. So I'm going to break down a Hollow Fleye, start to finish, to the best of my ability, with as much information as I can think of to put in it, so that you can literally attempt it and get pretty darn close. You're still going to have to practice it. Don't think you're not going to have to practice. Just because you have all the information doesn't mean you have all the perspective. It takes a while to accumulate the experience, but should get you going. So I'm going to put down a pretty beefy thread base. I'm going to suck this down, make sure that is glued to that tube as hard as I can. Walk it back up to about the midpoint. Now, if you cut the tubes all to the same length, let's say a 1/2 inch, and you tie them all exactly at the midpoint, then every tube will be exactly a 1/2 inch apart. All the tines will be exactly a 1/2 inch all the way down. And that's how you kind of jump through that thing. Now, if you look at this tail, and I'll zoom out real quick. If you look at this tail, this is the tail I've done both of these tail sections with. So you can kind of get a gauge for how much hair you're going to eat up. Now, this is kind of a softer tail, a little bit thinner diameter. It's about 4.5 inch hair length. Now, when you build this tail section, it's really imperative that you use the same tail, because each bucktail has unique characteristics. No two tails will be the same. They will not have the same trapped air. They will not be the same stiffness. Obviously, things people pay attention to are like length, but as far as rigidity, as far as how it's going to actually flex under the pressure of the water, will change from tail to tail. You want to use the same tail to build the entire tail section so that it all breathes as one. You don't want different stiffnesses going on inside your tail. It'll make it really, really hard to get a consistent end result. So you can see I've selected this, what I call the sweet spot. It's literally the middle third of the tail. This top third typically is shorter, and it typically doesn't have any trapped air. So it's really hard to get it to compress, a little bit stiffer. So it's really hard to get it to turn over, and it's not very forgiving to hollow tie with. You come down to the butt section. This is the closest to the deer, the actual animal, and the hair, the body hair, and it behaves like body hair. It retains some of that characteristic, has a bunch of trapped air. It makes it easy to kink, which makes it a little bit too soft to hollow tie with. But this is where you're going to finish the fly. This is where you're going to get your kind of muddler body hair characteristics to build a bulkhead. This is the sweet spot.
Hey, Gunnar, what thread are you using there?
Yeah. Here, let me finish this whole bucktail shindig, and then I'll jump on that. So the sweet spot is your medium, moderate compressibility and your medium, moderate stiffness with your greatest, most consistent length. It'll literally be the same length for this whole section. So you're always using the same length hair with the same rigidity. It's stiff enough you can shape it and control it, and it'll hold the shape without kinking, which is really important. And it'll compress so you can tie it in very, very easily. The thread, I am stuck between 2 at the moment. It depends on your tying prowess, but either Danville 6,000ths monofilament, so it's Danville fine mono, or I use a Vivis 8,000ths. So Vivis makes a clear mono, that's 8,000ths. Danville makes the 6,000ths. If you're a musky guy, I would recommend the 8,000ths mono. It pulls like GSP. You can work the snot out of it. It'll never break on you. It's absolutely fantastic. If you come from more of a delicate background, maybe that's the wrong advice. Once you've done 8,000ths for a while, move to 6, and 6 will teach you the correct density, because you won't be able to overdress with 6. You'll break your thread. So 6 can't, it's not as strong, it's not as thick. It's perfectly suitable for beasts, because beasts are built up of many sparse layers, right? Many sparse layers. You should be thinking sparse through the whole thing, because look at how solid that is. Look how solid that is. But if you could break it down from each section, you know, there's like 30 strands of hair at this tying point with Bob. There's only 30 strands. It's not a crazy amount. Hey, I got someone, I probably have a small child knocking on the door.
I love it.
What's up, buddy?
What's up, Dad?
Here, you want me to flip the camera around real quick? Now, you got to keep your head up here, because you're in your little undie-wondies, and we don't need to show the world your underwear. You can say hi, buddy. They can hear you right here. You see that, Mike?
Hi there.
You're live, buddy. There's no editing this out. Here. All right. I got to finish this. You going to bed?
Yeah, but can I stay with you for a little bit longer?
Sorry, buddy. I got to finish this up, okay? Yeah, don't worry. He's in here. Love you.
I'm staying
Sneak
here.
on out of here.
I'm staying in here until my snacks are ready.
You better get going. All right, Hez, check this out, buddy.
Okay.
I need you to be very quiet and listen, okay? You ready? We're going to switch back to the other camera here. Oh, this one. So we're going to break down this hollow fly technique. And you should pay attention, because I was talking to you the other day about your fly box. We need to be a little bit more economical with our material use. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab from this sweet spot. Now, I'm kind of running out of sweet spot here. I'm going to kind of be in the low section, but I'm going to teach you guys how to hollow tie as best as thoroughly as I can. Now, because we have moved up the tail, right? This is no longer my bottom stack. I got about 5 sections on here. I'm going to increase the density as I progress up through these sections. So this is going to be a little bit denser than the one previously. These are all pretty close to one another, but you should work on increasing density as you move forward. When you cut this off the hide, there's going to be insulative fibers, some short fibers. The short fibers don't do anything to build bulk. The hollow fly is the illusion of bulk. It's flipping it backwards to create the volume. So you don't need small fibers to increase density and make a bucktail deceiver thicker and bigger, or to put more fibers in the head. You want to get all that stuff out of there. You kind of pinch it at the midpoint and clean it out. Snacks are ready, dude. Love you, buddy.
Make sure you clean up this before tomorrow.
We're tying flies tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
I'll clean it up, dude.
Love it.
All right. So I'm going to take these bucktail butts. I'm going to pack them in my hand. They shouldn't be too disturbed here. You can use a hair packer, but you shouldn't really need it. And it's just because I'm too lazy to cut it. I'm not going to cut these little frills or make it super precise or ultra clean. It doesn't matter, squat. Don't worry about it. But I'm going to put this on backwards and switch hands. Now, this is a really cool technique. I hope the camera's tight enough you can kind of see it. But I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to suck it up in between that notch in my fingers. Let me see if I can really cam this over. I want you guys to be able to see this. It's a technique I learned from Giovanni De Passe. He's an Italian tyer, phenomenal, unbelievable work, but he runs a camera over top and he brings the thread up through his fingers, pinches it so that he can come down with complete and utter slack that is under control. And it allows you to get a perfect catch that keeps the thread perfectly vertical. And you need to make, 2 or 3 perfectly symmetrical, vertical, perpendicular to the axis of this tube wraps. because I'm going to keep some light pressure on the bobbin, take a thumbnail, push it onto that hair, and I'm going to rotate it, right? So it's all tied on top, and now it's all tied on top, and now it's getting smashed around. So when you kind of do this push, pull, pinch technique, the hair has to run away from that pressure of your fingers, squeezing it and squeezing it and squeezing it, and it's going to work itself into uniformity. That's the goal. And if your thread wraps are perfectly perpendicular, then the hair will rotate around that axis symmetrical.
That's really great tip, Gunnar. That's the trouble I have, is getting it to go perfectly around the shank. But you're saying you have to get those wraps totally vertical in order to do that.
Yep. If you have a directionality, the hair has to chase the friction from the thread that's on it. And so you'll see when you pull it tight, you'll have like a gap in the bottom or something where the hair's like splitting in two different directions. You'll have kind of like naked sections where it's chased the friction of the thread instead of distributing itself nice and smooth. Now you can come and take all the slack out of that, right? Because we did 3 kind of loose turns. So you take all the slack out and you compress the butts, and I'm pulling straight down, and my bobbin nose is in line with my thread. It's always in line. You never want to pull with like a perpendicular bobbin nose, because it isolates all the pressure right here at the nose, and you'll either score a bobbin if you're tying with like GSP or something, or you'll just snap the thread. But if you pull it in line so that there's no external pressure on it, it's just the 100% breaking strength of the thread, you can really reef on it. I'm going to shake my table. I am within 85, 90% of the breaking strength of this thread. It's serious. I wish I had 2 cameras so you could see the look in my face. I have taught this so many times, and you can just grab people's hair and rip it out. They do not tie hard enough. So check this out. I'm going to take another turn, take another turn. These are all perfectly perpendicular as close as you can get. I have not let go of the bobbin. Everything is under tension. I'm going to rip this hair backwards. Really focus on getting it backwards. I am kind of softening the butt sections with my fingers. I'm being really, really aggressive on it, as aggressive as you can be. This is not fly tying anymore. It's lure building. Like get angry with it. You got to get your thread through here. If you've done any deer hair body work, you'll be very good at this. Wrap forward, under tension, wrap back. All right, so this has like 5 turns of thread on it. I brought it up through the hair under tension, wrapped it forward under tension, and then went over it. So there's no way these 5 wraps can ever come out. And you should be able to reef on this hair and shake your whole table and never get this stuff to pull out. It should never be able to pull out, even with those 5 turns, because the hair is compressible and you tied the snot out of it with round, hard thread. Like monofilament thread is the bee's knees for bucktail work. Now, your ability to make a symmetrical hollow fly rests in your ability to make a symmetrical cone. So we're going to start building up a thread cone. And if you think about this hair, it's kind of sticking up at 90 degrees. I can take thread up to that all I want. It's going to stay at 90. I eventually have to take thread over it at some level to shape the angle that I want. If that angle is more on the top than it is at the bottom, because you're tying more on the top than there is at the bottom, you'll get an asymmetrical cone, and the hair is going to reflect that. So the goal here is symmetrical cone. The only way to build that is circular thread path that you then have to drag back and forth in a very precise way. So we don't have a lot of room to work with here. And there's one more trick to this, but I'm going to build up kind of like a backstop, if you will, almost like a ball, which is Andre Van Wyk. It's I hopefully have said that right, Andre. But he's, is it South America? South Africa. Man, South Africa tire. He puts this wonderful little thread dam here, and it's so that as you build the cone, it has kind of like a stopping place that it doesn't. You'll see people as they build this cone, they'll stay up close to the hair, The thread bump will grow at an unstable level, and it'll shed off and just ripple down. If you build this kind of nice little ball here, it acts like a backstop, so that as you get into the actual hair section, it builds a nice, perfect little cone. Now, maybe that was just a moment of magic, but what you have to understand here is, I'm going to undo that real quick because it was too smooth. It was too smooth. We need to break it down. So what I'm going to do here is this is a right bobbin, right? And even if you're just tying with an eared bobbin, this has a certain level of tension on it. It's preset. And if you tie at the tension of your bobbin, or if you lock up your bobbin while you're tying, now that the thread is going over the hair to set the angle, it'll recompress it. You can't recompress it because it destroys the actual angle you're setting it to. It'll literally reflare it kind of vertical. You gotta keep it relaxed. So in order to do that, you have to pull out thread so that you're not restricted anymore by the tension of the bobbin. And as you tie, it's going to eat up the circumference because it's not going to be pulling any more off the spool. If you're pulling thread off the spool, then there's tension on it, more tension than you would like at this point, because I am now at the point to control and set the angle of this hair. So I have to pull out thread on the thread bump before I get to the hair so I don't compress it. And then I have to tie lighter so no thread comes off the spool. And it should be just a moment of making a very simple, and you should be able to kind of walk it forward and walk it down. Let me walk it way down. So you can walk it way down. You should be able to unwrap this one wrap at a time and set every angle you need from collapsed tail to 90-degree open, right? You should be able to walk this off. So if you develop the skill to be able to set any angle from basically 0 to 90 or like 20 to 90, and now you can tie one section at a time that you are threading onto mono, and you can control the length of each tube. You can go in and reset the length of each tube because there's a little bit left out the front and there's a little bit in the chuck of my vise. You can add spacers. There's no rush to get a perfect extended body fly, whether that's bucktail deceiver, bulkhead, hollow fly, beast, it doesn't matter. You should be able to take the time to get an absolutely perfect fly. And then you just come in with a little half hitch and a whip finish on top of that thread bump. When you cut this off, this is what I like to do. When you tie with the monofilament system, if you come in with the CA Plus kicking glue, this will plastic weld the monofilament. And I know this because I've messed up flies, and you go in after the fact with a razor blade and you try to cut it off. Now imagine you cut your thread. What do you think happens, right? Your thread unravels. If you take a razor blade to this in about 5 minutes, you'll peel off a chunk of plastic. So the CA glue is going to kick in a way that is going to melt the plastic together. Now that's pretty important because we have a fairly fragile thread dam controlling the angle of that hair that can never now be unraveled or destroyed by teeth, none of that. It's literally welded itself and made kind of like a hard fitting plastic cone over that bucktail, protecting it, keeping it safe. So the mono thread on the tubes with CA Plus, I mean, you should be able to put fish after fish after fish and never once have to worry about a section of this hollow fly. So let me pop this out real quick. So it'll have a little bit of friction on it that you should be able to rip the pin out. Get out of there, pin. I'm on video here. I can't edit this. There you go. Let's see, which one of my tails? This one needs to be finished here. And then you should just be able to thread that on. Now, because that tube was at full length, if you kind of look at it, as you get closer to that hook, you're going to want the frequency of the joints. If they were all 1/2 inch, you're going to want maybe the last two to be 3/8. You're going to want them to get a little denser and closer together. So I can pull that back off. I can come into this underside. I can trim off a little bit, flatten it so I can rethread it. And this is the process of building this tail. Imagine you just did this 6 times over, 7 times over. You can literally take just a few days and you could make 10 of these things and have, just find the best tail you got and just make 4 or 5 different tail sections to finish flies on.
And
So
Gunnar, you may have said this, but are each of those sections the same length and angle, or are you varying the angle as you go further towards the head?
Yeah, so this is beast design. This is the problem with scatterbrained fly tires like myself trying to give presentations. So let's just, this will be like the bend of the hook, right? So this is your monofilament section coming off the back. I'll get this, let me draw this real quick. You're gonna have tube, 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 fine point in the middle, 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 and then it's going to be tied off. So you have like, say, 5 joints, right? And the tubes are all the same length, but they might get a little shorter because you're going to adjust it as you tie that in towards the hook. You're going to tie at the midpoint of each tube. And if you tie at the midpoint in each tube, the distance between the midpoint of each tube is the exact length of the tube that you cut it to. So if you cut each tube to 1/2 inch and then you tie in the middle, it's a 1/2 inch between middles, if
Right.
that makes sense,
Yep.
right? And so then the tubes can get a little shorter as you approach the hook so that you increase the frequency. It acts like it's more dense in a way. And then your angles of attack gear for your bucktail. This is why you should buy Bob's book, because it's magnificent. So that hair is all the same length and it's all from the same spot on the tail. That first one is going to be the most collapsed, and they're simply going to open up as you progress. That's what's going to give you the taper in the Fleye. Unlike the Game Changer, which is literal taper, right? You trim it to the exact taper that you get, and it is what you pay for. This is opening up as you progress forward.
Gunnar, quick question about glue and sections.
Yeah.
One, do you find a difference between the CA, Zap-A-Gap, or using the WAPSI cyanamide-based glues? And the second part of the question is, once you build these sections, are you gluing them onto the mono so they don't spin or swim incorrectly?
So the later part of that question, the tubes all are free. They're free to do whatever you want. If you tie symmetrically, there's no uneven force on them. So they kind of just self-correct and do what they want. The downside to this style, if there's a downside, the downside is you can't countershade. You can countershade once you're on the hook. So you could create that illusion of, say, like an olive back. The moment you get onto the hook, you can start having complete control over your color. But the tail has to be a solid color because the tubes are free to spin. I don't glue them in any way, shape, or form to the mono. They're all just free to do whatever they want on there.
Great.
And I saw someone ask if I used the slide lock action discs, which was a really cool, that was the original idea. So I had showed you guys that I just tie an overhand knot in the mono, right? So there's just a little knot that stops everything from sliding off that I hit with glue so it'll never open up. There is a bead that you can put on here called the slide lock stopper bead that'll allow you to adjust the tail after it's tied onto a hook. It's pretty cool, but it's probably too cool because it's almost like too much modularity. Like I feel like once it's on a hook, I didn't really use that feature. So that's not something I necessarily do anymore. I just tie a knot and let it rip. Because typically once I finish a fly, that fly is done. I don't usually go back and over tinker. I feel like if I have too many options, I spend time screwing around with options instead of fishing. So I don't use them anymore, but it is something you have access to if you want to keep it modular.
Right. And the glue brand.
Stopper beads. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am from a generation that never used head cement, really. I have always used Zap-A-Gap. Or just any CA+. I've always used super glue. I've never used any of the fly tying head cements, whatever they are. I don't even know what they are. Like you mentioned something right over my head. No idea what it is. All I know is that the CA+ medium from Zap-A-Gap is perfect. I have used other CA+. They all kick the same. They all plastic weld. The medium viscosity is my favorite to work with. The thin penetrates a little bit too deep, a little too fast. It'll get up your nose and hurt your brain a little bit. Yeah, and the medium's just forgiving. You got, probably 20 seconds before that's done doing what it's doing. So
great. Thank you.
But yeah, let's I have so many more topics. I can't believe how long this is going. I'm sorry, guys. So for all you saltwater guys, you should be pretty excited because you can just put this on a hook and run with it. You know how to finish it, which is a Hollow Fleye, typically finishing with a bulkhead or reverse bulkhead. Because I like to make videos even more complicated than they should be, I would like to, if time allows, introduce you to what I call a dropper shank, which is an adaptation from Scott Lewis's shank builds. It does some really cool thing as far as warm water fly tying, especially in the musky realm. So what you have here, and we'll get as close in as we can, what you have here is a custom shank built out of 51 thousandths of an inch stainless steel wire. And you can see I have it bent down. So there's a barrel wrap at the bottom and a barrel wrap at the front. The thing about e-socks, the thing about pike and muskie that's kind of unique and different from the salt world is how they feed. So if you, all you salt guys, if you fish striped bass and you fish snook and you fish largemouth or smallmouth or you fish peacock, they have something that's basically suction feeding. They're referred to typically as like a bucket mouth. They typically have sandpaper type teeth structure, but they inhale, they're able to extend their jaws so flippin' far to take in so much water that they expel out the gills that whatever forage they're attacking gets sucked into their mouth head first, right? So they're a head first eating species almost all the time. And if you look at traditional saltwater design, it's why Bob's Beast, even in its 12-inch form, has one single hook right at the head, because it solves that problem of nearly all of those species. Now, if you look at things like sharks, or if you look at things like barracuda or bluefish or pike and muskie, they don't feed that way. They do have some mouth open and some suction, but for the most part, they are a ram feeder. They literally, bam, they just bash it with their mouth open. They grab, they rip and tear, they slash and grab, right? And it's even typical of trout, like especially brown trout. And if you look at their teeth structure, they're completely different. They're either designed to do one of two things, which is one, to cut, like in the case of like barracuda or shark, or two, to puncture and hold, which is pike and muskie. So because muskie are adapted to eating forage that is so big, they can't always get it head first. So what they do is they grab the crap out of it, which typically means aiming for the middle of the fish. They just grab it and then they take it down to the bottom and they bite the snot out of it and let it go, and they let it go and then re-grab it and let it go and re-grab it, and they turn it head first and then they eat it. So a lot of times when something comes up and eats your fly, pike, muskie, and trout, they're not necessarily trying to eat your fly. They're trying to grab your fly. And that means that if you have a hook only in the front, they're going to grab it in the middle, and you're going to have this wonderful, epic eat that you're going to see, and then you're just going to pull the fly right out of their mouth because the hook was never in their mouth. Now, I am not the biggest fan of running multi-hook rigs, which is a solution, right? Solution is to articulate flies, or solution is to run a hook and then a shank in the front. The dropper shank is a really cool solution because it's 100% customizable, because I build my own shanks, and to the shank length. So I can take Bob's Beast and I can make, you know, an 1.5 inch long dropper shank and time the traditional saltwater style for bucket mouths, or I can make a 3-inch shank or a 3.5 inch shank and drop a hook in the mid body of that fly. You have control, total control over where that hook placement is, which allows you to run a single hook. Now, you can do so many cool things with the dropper shank because of this loop in the back. That loop in the back, you're going to split ring a hook on there, which means if you have to cut a hook because it's stuck in the bone, you didn't just waste a fly, you can replace it. If it gets snagged and broken, you can replace it. If you have a hook that's too heavy, you can lighten it up. If it's not tracking right, you can make it heavier. If you're not afraid to toe the line between single hooks and treble hooks, you can swap between the two. You can have, let's say, a saltwater scenario where you put an 80-pound split ring and a 5-aught on here, and then you can take it, you know, pike fishing the next week and put a 20-pound split ring and a 3-aught on there. You can literally change it on the dot. For musky fishing, the biggest implication is being able to cut hooks that are stuck in fish jaws. Like you'll get the barb through the bone, and good luck getting out of that. So you just cut the hook and save the fish and get it back in the water. So this keeps your fly swimming. Now, the drop down gives it leverage. It lowers the center of gravity, and it allows a naked hook weight, because the hook's not dressed, it has no friction on it, it has no water resistance, to kill the fly significantly more, and it doesn't follow up with the tail. So that's the dropper shank kind of in its simplest form of all of its benefits. You can come in here. It depends on what you guys want. What do you guys think? Do I have time to finish this fly here?
Yeah, man, go for it. I mean, this is such good stuff. I think everyone's excited to see more.
All right.
Yeah, don't stop.
All right. So you just take that mono and you tie it in. I like a little bit of looseness here, and I'm just going to pinch that and suck it right down to the top. Now, I've never really had a problem catching that mono. You'll see a lot of guys flatten it or pinch it with pliers if they get it to roll, because you're tying round on round mono on a round shank. It tends to be a little tricky. It's always been fairly kind to me, but that should come out in a perfectly straight line. And you can see my next tying point is going to be, right about there. It's going to keep that spacing, that 1/2 inch spacing all the way up onto the shank just perfectly. And because there's no hook back here, there's no pressure on this. You don't have to tie this mono in, for like 5 inches, like all the way up to that hook eye. You just, a little 1/2 inch tying point is all you need to secure that. It's never going to come out of there. Now I have a few things going on with this shank that are, special, but I have steel beads on here. Does everybody see those steel beads? So when you guys have Mark on next week, I don't know if you'll, I know it's a casting lesson, but these beads serve a few purposes. So Bob's Beast, as it is, we talked about how when the hair gets wet, those Hollow Fleye ties are able to kind of collapse with the water for casting. And as soon as they hit the water, they kind of open back up to their silhouette, their full-size silhouette, right? So you have a full-size fly in the water, but you have a very streamlined bulleted fly for casting. So when you get into really big flies, you'll probably stumble upon Mark Sadati's weight balancing technique, which simply states that you should weight a fly relative to its air resistance. It's a principle that exists throughout all of fly tying, including dry flies and nymphs. Like if you've ever cast a clunky nymph, right? No air resistance, a big tungsten bead head, they're clunky, they're not fun to class. It's literally reminiscent of a clouser. They're almost identical. It's just typically fished on a different scale of rod and maybe a different line. So maybe you might not recognize it, but it's the same casting problems. And it's both fly driven, which is weight. Now, if you look at a big gauge, 8/0 partridge predator, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It might be a different hook. But the weight of the steel and the position of the weight affects how big flies cast. So that hook weight is enough to counteract any and all resistance, air resistance that would be on this fly, so that it would fly in a very stable fashion and it would false cast at the most efficient level. That's what weight balancing is. It's controlling the weight to air resistance to maximize the efficiency of false casting in loop size. So I have 3 steel beads on here. These are 3/16 of an inch. Now, because I built the shank, I put them on in between the barrel wraps, and I'm going to use them as material dams. So I only have to do about 2 hollow ties, and then it's going to be material dam, material dam, material dam. So the shank should go pretty quick if I would ever stop talking. Now, these have about 0.2 grams of weight. And this is kind of the weight that I'm using to mimic the weight of that hook, to put the weight in the front, which is going to help the fly fish immediately. You tie, a foot-long fly, and a lot of times it has a lot of problems breaking through the water tension on the surface, especially when you have a bulkhead. So it helps the fly fish immediately, get down immediately, break through the surface tension immediately. It's going to be balanced. It's not going to like jig super heavily. It's going to be balanced with the density and the buoyancy of the bulk here. And it happens to do something that I kind of theorized. But when you talk about Mark's weight balancing, I also study archery. And one of the things in archery that you'll come across is something called front of center. It's basically how they measure the stability of an arrow in flight for a long range shot. So you have, the length of your arrow, you have how heavy it is, like its grains per inch, you have how heavy the head is, right? The broadhead or the field point or whatever you're putting on there. And you need to know how heavy it is in front of the midpoint for it to be stable. If it's heavy in the tail, the thing will, you'll never get it to fly in a nice straight line. It'll never be accurate. If it's heavy in the head, kind of like a clouser, it'll go up and it'll drop fast. But if you want stability, if you want something that's going to be accurate at distance, you're looking for about 15% front of center for the overall weight. So when I have a really big fly, and you can just try this, if you have like a lot of hackles in the tail and you have a really light hook, they don't fly very good. They don't fly very good. Yes, I 100% agree with weight balancing, but I also believe you can manipulate how the fly literally tracks and balances and flies through the air. So that's a theory that I'm kind of working on. But 3 steel beads at about 0.6 grams. Now, people freak out about weight, right? Because if you talk about weight balancing, and then you show somebody casting a beast on a 5-weight, they go, well, you can make it as heavy as you want, and then you can cast it as far as you want, right? If it gets heavy enough, you can throw it on a bait caster or a spin rod. Okay, 0.6 grams is about the size of lead eyes that might be in a sex dungeon or a butt monkey, right? This is like trout size amount of weight. It's so light. On a Beast Fleye, you don't even know it's there. It's just about having some nose weight to punch through the wind, break through the water, and make the fly stable. This is not about getting able to chuck this thing on a spin rod. 0.6 grams is almost nothing. So I just want to clarify that, because people take the argument for weight balancing and then they go way too far to try to prove their point. And it's like, we're not at that scale. This is a very reasonable thing to be doing, trust me. So let's get some hollow ties in here. I'm going to try to rip through this thing and get onto these beads so I can show you guys how to use them as material dams. For all you dudes who want to keep it weightless, of course, you don't have to put the steel beads on there. And if you still want to use material dams, you can use plastic beads. So that it's not kind of something you have to do, just to clarify. Is there any questions, or am I just?
Yeah, there's a whole
guys,
bunch.
You gave me the floor. It was a very
no, this is great, Gunnar. You're doing great. I'm just trying to pick through some of the questions here while you're doing that.
Yeah. And if there's interest, I have one more hollow that I'll probably do here that I could break down. If you want the technique to be double dipped there, that's not a problem. And when we're going to finish with a bulkhead. So there's a lot of similarities there.
Great questions.
I can't wait to see how you finish this. I'm mesmerized.
I'm trying to cruise here. So I do like to add some flash in here. If you look at Pops, he's got something in there called angel hair flash, which is this really fine shredded mylar. It's just supposed to kind of be saturated. My favorite is wing and flash, but I also use polar flash a good deal. If you're looking for flash options, those are kind of my two favorite. And to save time, because it is a tying step, I typically run every other bump. Every other bucktail stack will just get a little bit of flash on it.
So one question going back to the drop hook is, do you feel you have better hookups with drop hooks or trebles?
So I will drop a treble. I'm not opposed to doing that. I don't like fishing multiple hooks. So I will fish a single hook and I will fish a single treble. Those kind of are equivalent in my mind. Not everybody likes to toe that line. I get that. As far as hookups go, so I don't notice it so much in the Beast because bucktail does so little to impede hook gap as far as like the rigidity of the material. If you start tying some pretty dense muddler heads or things like Bufords, which is essentially a musky-sized muddler, right? The Brad Bowen Buford is basically a hollow tie with a modified bulkhead that's spun butts really, really tight. That can impede a hook gap, especially if you're tying on like a 2-aught B10S or a 3-aught B10S, which is very common for people to do when they get into it because they don't actually know what a big hook is. If you've tied on a size 16 your whole life, a 2-aught's a scary hook. Musky guys are like, 6-aught, 5-aught, 4-aught, 6-aught, 8-aught. Like you're all over the place. Like you couldn't care less. 2-aught's a pretty small hook in this business. The more you're in it. And so it depends on how you tie. If you're tying this on a 4-aught or a 6-aught, you're probably not going to notice a big difference in hookups aside from the position of the hook. But as far as the gap, it probably is about the same. I do notice a difference with trebles. You tend not to have the fish that eat it and then get off. And you're like, what the heck? Brad Bowen had me down to finish filming something called Musky Country Lessons. I think that's Musky Country Legends. I forget the name. But literally, we put about 14 hours on the water the first day, got a bunch of follows, had a few eats, missed a few fish. Second day, we're literally going down underneath this bridge. I make a huge bomb cast, swing it into the deep hole, strip it upstream. There's this about 45-inch muskie that eats it at rod length away, straight down under my feet, and he literally bit the thing. I kind of went, and it just go, and just like pops out of his mouth. That tends not to happen with trebles. They tend to find some skin, and this allows you to fish a treble. People don't like that, but it does. And trebles are, it's 3 for 1. They're simply more effective. There's a reason why every gear lure on the market uses a treble. I'm personally opposed to using 2 trebles or 3 trebles, but I'll fish one. I'll definitely pinch your barbs and be able to have hook cutters and all these things. And this allows you to fish split rings and hook cutters and make sure you are getting fish in the water, keeping them in the water, reviving them quickly. But yeah, I think that'll cover that real quick. So I am going to, let's do one more white here before I switch up color combos, because I am going to do kind of a fading contrast head. I have some pretty neat hair from Musky Fool over here. That's one of my favorite colors that we'll tease you guys with. Ooh, that was dense. I'm on the verge of maybe trying to tie a little too fast because I know I'm going over here. So that's that Giovanni pinch, perfect perpendicular wraps, little compression so it's under some tension while you distribute that with the pinch, pinch, pinch so it runs away from the pressure. Now that I'm on bare hook shank, you probably couldn't see this on the tube, but you'll get a little spin, almost like spinning deer here. It'll track the friction of the thread as you pull out the slack. Again, there's only 5 turns, but they're super hard. They're all perfectly perpendicular. So I have a really tight, basically backstop on that bucktail so that when I flip it over, a lot of times you'll go to flip your bucktail over and you'll notice the bottom is pushed out from the front or the top's pushed out from the bottom. It won't be a flat face. This should be a flat face, as flat as you can get it. And I'll show you, let me wrap forward and wrap back so it's locked in place. The face of this right here by my fingernail should be perfectly flush. If you have a little cant to it or a little cant to it, it shows you that you're not tying perfectly in the round with symmetrical pressure like that. And then it becomes really hard to tie symmetrical cone around a face that's not symmetrical. If your thread base is loose at all on this shank, the hair will just run away from the pressure as you build it up towards the bead. So you got to have a really aggressive thread base there. I'm going to come in. This is some Wisconsin flame. You can see, again, I've used the sweet spot for all of my hollow tying, but I'm going to run down here into the butt section closest to the animal with the most trapped air to really help it flare off this bead and get some proper volume to it. Try to find the longest hair I can here.
And Gunnar, I noticed you don't use a pen for these hollow ties. Like a lot of guys use a pen.
Yeah, so I'll show you when we do the bulkhead. Because I'm not going to hollow tie this right here. So it'll kind of defeat the purpose. So I only use those 5 turns to hold everything, right? And if you use a pen to control the hair and get it to flip backwards, essentially you have to let go of your bobbin. You have to let go of your bobbin so you can run a pen and then hold the hair back, which means those 5 turns have no tension on them. And those 5 turns will back off. Now you can use the push tool if you take your bucktail butts and you tie your bucktail butts all the way down and back, and then you put a drop of glue on them, then you can let go, like who cares? But for the efficiency of tying, I don't need 30 wraps to hold those in place. I only need 5. So I just do 5 really precise wraps, hold my bobbin super hard, manipulate the hair with one hand, grab the bobbin, switch, bring it up and back. So because I never let go of the bobbin, I don't use any tools. And again, it depends on how you treat the hair, because you can treat the hair in a way that it won't back off. It just takes a little bit longer. It might be more durable to do it that way. Maybe you'll have more success getting it symmetrical. But I find if you just pinch those fingers and just ram it into the hair, there is a key there that you want the hair to flip straight back. Right? The hair has to get kinked and flipped straight back over itself. You don't want a hair kinking off to the side, because if you get it to distribute symmetrically and then you have it kinking off to the side, it just became non-symmetrical. So you have to get the hair to flip straight back, which the push tools help with. But if it comes at a sake of durability, because somebody might not understand that, they might just put 5 wraps on, because Gunnar said 5 wraps, and then let go of their bobbin, use a push tool, and then as they're ramming that hair, those 5 wraps are just getting loose and loose and loose and loose, and then they bring their thread up and you can just rip their hair out. Like, if you ever see me at a show, just come up and try to destroy a fly. Like, you're invited to just start ripping at it, because nothing's gonna happen at the sake of my insanity of watching you do it, which would let's probably start laughing, because I'd be like, oh, you saw that Masters on the Fly video.
Hilarious.
It'd be crazy. So I'm going to take this hair. It's a little bit longer than the white, but that's okay, because I'm going to try to build a little bit of extra bulk in the shoulder. So if there's some overlap in my tips, that's okay. Typically the tips are all the same length all the way down, but you can get away with it a little bit once you get under your shank. I'm going to cut these clean. I'm not going to shorten the hair. I'm not trying to introduce taper. I'm not trying to change the length of it. I'm just trying to make it clean. I'm going to take that thread with extreme precision. So you have to come up with kind of slack and wrap it as close to the bead on the bottom side as you can. You're going to repeat that 3 times. And then look at this flare that you're going to get from this basically material dam. Treating it the same way, get it a little spin on here. Make sure it's really even. And then I'm going to wrap that as tight to the bead as I can. And like, that's it. That's done. Like, this shouldn't take any time at all, aside from the fact that I'm going to come in and put some flash on it. And I might be able to put that bead. I'm going to tie this bead into place so that I have a backstop for my flash. And again, this thread dam, you know, this, your thread base needs to be really aggressive so that that next layer of bucktail doesn't slide back from that pressure against the bead.
Hey, Gunnar, there was a question coming back to, you just reminded me of, with the tube sections about the tubes rotating. Does it really matter if they're all symmetrical 360? Do you care if the tubes rotate around the hard mono?
I don't, not at all. That's why I don't do anything to change it. And so this goes back to my musky forge. So one of the conversations Mark Sadati and I had was with regard to the Beast and its silhouette. So Sadati has his slammer, right? And the slammer, especially the feather slammer, was geared toward bunker, whereas he thought the Beast was a much better mullet imitation, right? So there's a pretty significant difference in silhouette between bunker and mullet, as far as one being more high and tight and one being more round and symmetrical with that kind of triangular shaped head. And of course, I am, talking out the wazoo here because I don't fish saltwater, and so I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm pretty sure I got that all right.
No, that's right, though. That's right.
And so when I tie a Beast, I do nothing to manipulate the silhouette. I keep everything perfectly in the round, geared towards symmetry at every single stage. So if the spinning of the tubes doesn't matter to me. And that's because I am imitating suckers, fall fish, chubs, juvenile perch, full-size perch, walleye. They are all nearly round, perfectly round fish, big broad shoulders, big round blunt heads. Every single one of them are shaped that way. Now, if you look at this Beast from Bob, you would have to ask him, but it's very high and tight, and that is not Bob's tying. If I had to guess, that is because this was in a Ziploc bag for 8 years going to and from shows. So that has manipulated and changed the silhouette of the hair. It's kind of been conditioned into this silhouette. But if I had to guess, Bob tied this perfectly in the round to match that kind of mullet silhouette. So you can manipulate the shape of bucktail. This is something that's addressed in Bob's book. You can manipulate the shape of bucktail. When I am putting it on a round shaft or a round tube and I'm squeezing it and squeezing it and squeezing it, the goal is to squeeze it enough times that it random itself out, right? It just kind of, it just fills in all those gaps from all the pressure. Well, if you intentionally squeeze top and bottom, and then you take all the slack out while squeezing top and bottom, you get more hair on the sides, you get more flare out to the side. You manipulate the silhouette to have this wide, flat silhouette. Likewise, you can pinch it left and right. Take all the slack out while you pinch it. You'll get more hair top and bottom. You'll get a taller fly. I have never tried that distribution technique while hollow tying. I've never done both. I've done silhouette manipulation in a bucktail deceiver in a bulkhead. I have never tried silhouette manipulation and hollow tying. that's manipulation. I've never tried to do both. So, and I've never seen Bob teach both. It's something you'd have to ask him. It would be really cool to know. But his silhouette is a product of how it's stored, not anything else.
That's interesting.
Ooh, I am sweating, man. I got all these overhead lights on. I am cooking in this room.
Gunnar, you're doing it. This is incredible. Thank you so much.
This is awesome, Gunnar. Thank you.
All right, so we got, let's do 2 more tie-ins and then we'll finish this fly up. I can't wait to get this thing wet and take a picture of it. So again, ripped out a bunch of hair. They're getting denser. I am making them clean, but I am not trying to introduce taper or cut long hair short. I am capturing that with as much precision as I can, as close to that bead as I can. I am going to reef the crap out of it, suck out all the slack, make sure it's symmetrical, tie it up to those beads, and then literally tie it off. So this whole material dam thing can be pretty fast and sloppy. This is not like super precise hollow tie work, and it's one of the things I love. If you ever talk to Bob about like tying a bulkhead, he's like, it's like tying off the seat of your pants. It's tying off the cuff. You have to be in this state of mind, especially when you start trimming it, because people look for precision. If you look at this fly right now and you had never done bucktail work in your life, this would be like, this is so gaudy, this is crazy, it's flaring all over the place. Man, the moment you get this thing wet and tame it down and look at it, it's like you have to be a sculptor and you have to see the inside of what you're trying to sculpt. You can't get distracted by all this flare, because that flare is what's going to compress. Remember the fly rod tip. Think back to the fly rod tip. That's what's going to give you your swim. Now this is just a cool technique that I'll show you. I have some of the dark fibers on this bucktail because I've used all my bucktail, right? So I have the nice dyed fibers. That was the dyed white. And then I have this kind of natural brown that took some of the dye and it's mixed in here. And if I just tie it in, it'll end up in one spot. It'll all clump together as it spins around the hook, which I don't want because it'll act slightly differently because it's a little bit stiffer, a little bit less compressible. So I'm going to take those tips, I'm going to pinch them with my thumb. Oh, this is out of frame. Shoot. Anyway, I'm gonna hand blend this. You just rip stack it and rotate it. I wish it was in frame. Sorry, guys.
You're basically just mixing it in. You're blending.
Yeah, I'm hand blending it so that the textural difference and the structural difference is distributed throughout all the way, right? I don't want it to get stuck in one spot on the fly and then create a symmetry problem or a disturbance problem with how the fly is deflecting water and then it's not tracking true. Now, it was pretty technical because when you do that, you change the position of all these butts in space and you have to hand stack them back to flat, which is quite a skill to have. You can always use a hair packer, but it's just a fun thing I do all this stuff in hand just for the fun of it. We'll get these guys back to clean, super finesse catch, tight to the bead. And now we're gonna get into the bulkhead, reverse bulkhead side of the spectrum, which will be the most fun, especially if you've never done it before. So when I talked about bucktail and I was geeking out about it, I had mentioned how it's hollow and compressible in certain sections. And this is probably the coolest thing because you can treat and manipulate the hair at the base, the hair that's closest to the animal, like deer hair. And these butts, instead of generating flare, as I'm doing off of these material dams, they can be used to basically double as a muddler head. So you're going to take the hair, you're still going to hollow tie it, while tying a muddler butt section to build as much turbulence in the head of this fly that's all going to be captured and accentuated by the soft tip section. So we'll do one of this color and then we're gonna finish red. It'll be quite an interesting color combo here. And this is gonna get a bit dirty with our brown coming off the natural hide. And I've mentioned this once or twice, but it's worth noting. The hair is getting denser. I don't know if you can tell in the camera frame, but the hair is getting denser. Once your hair starts getting properly dense, it becomes useful to use a comb. You can see how much waste is in there. Look at all that fur. That's garbage. It'll cut your thread. It'll stop it from compressing. It won't behave the right way. Get that out of there. I'm going to hand blend that again so that the different structural, kind of components of the hair aren't interfering with each other. I'm going to drop that into the palm of my hand so the butts are all lined up. But here, if they're messy, that's okay, because then I won't have a super clean edge. And I'm going to tie these in about a 1/2 inch long, and I'm going to leave them long. Now, with all of that hair on there, you still have to get perpendicular wraps so that you can still get, right, the fundamentals of the bucktail manipulation never go away, no matter how uncomfortable the process is. You always have to maintain that perpendicular, pull out the slack, extra wrap or two, hold that bobbin, lock it down, force that hair backwards. And you can see I just quadrupled the density because it's not just a simple double. It doesn't just double the density because the butts are the thickest part. And I've put that right at the core, right at the center line of that fly. And now we're going to repeat our hollow fly technique while using the butts to create a muddler, right? So this is Bob Popovics. He would call it the bulkhead, but it's the bulkhead hollow fly combination, which I always call a reverse bulkhead or a hidden bulkhead. And he seems to tolerate me screwing around with his fly naming stuff. So that's what I call it.
I love it. Looks beautiful. And Gunnar, someone asked about this, and I always wonder about this too. So damming versus tying over the hair.
Sure.
You have to like build the dam to a total taper to the hair before you tie over. It looks like you actually go back and forth between damming and just tying over it to get the right shape.
Yeah, this is the problem with me is I'm in tying mode right now. And so I'm trying to get her done. So I make a thread bump first in the Andre Van Wyck style.
Yeah.
And then I will come up to the hair and I'll usually bridge that gap a few times so the transition's smooth. And then I do tie over the hair, but this is a poor example because I am leaving this intentionally very open, near 90 degrees, knowing that the butts from my next section are going to push in. They're going to collapse that hollow angle a little bit. So at this head section, you can just leave this crap at about 90 degrees and let the water do what the water is going to do. Right? You have to see through the flare to the fishing, what's going to happen while you're stripping and animating this through the water. Mm-hmm. So back when I was into the hollow sections, my thread cone is it's really hard to do with my hand, but it's an actual cone, as in the butt. My bucktail butts are here, and my cone is coming over the butts to control the angle. I don't just come straight up to them. I always go over them slightly, which is why I think the monofilament, it's imperative that you draw out more thread than you need, so you tie with less pressure than your bobbin, so you're not pulling thread off the bobbin so that it's not recompressing the hair, so you can tie with perfect tension, but it's very light tension so that you can actually tie over it while controlling it. And then that Zappa gap is what seals the deal and makes sure that it's plastic welds and that shape and angle and cone does not change.
And that tension over the hairs controls the angle of the hair coming off.
Yep. So if you remember, I had showed you a hollow and I had unwrapped it as it opened up slowly, right? So every wrap, it was because my thread is over top of it that every wrap opened it up a little bit.
And Gunnar, just so everybody understands, we're getting bulkier up front or denser because that creates disturbance that allows the tips to flow and move more naturally going to the back of the fly.
Yep, for sure, 100%.
Okay, good.
And there's also, so it's typically about what's the word? Turbulent flow, right? So you're trying to generate turbulence at the front of the fly, which swims the rest of the fly. It's going to swim the hair. That light tip is going to be able to take the turbulence and breathe with it, right? So that is all head-driven action. The tips, the whole tip to tail, tips from shoulder to tail aspect of the pop design is being driven by this head unit, disturbing the water. So you're trying to increase the density for that sake of pushing more water. People always use that term, pushing water, disturbing water, creating turbulence. I am also doing it for balance in the water, right? Because the bucktail is going to have kind of a buoyancy aspect, especially keeping the butts in and flaring the butts in this way, so that the fly will be more likely to suspend on a strip and kill, which again is kind of in the freshwater mindset. And then also, so you have the buoyancy, you have the strip and kill aspect, and then you have that interplay between all of the weight, those 3 steel beads in the bucktail, right? I don't want a pattern that's necessarily going to head dive, right? It's not going to head dive. So it's all the above. It's all the above.
It gives the fly incredible action through the water.
Yeah, it's everything you ever want. So we got one more bulkhead, and then I think we're done. I'm going to switch up to red here. I'm going to keep it about the same length. Let it walk forward towards those barrel wraps. Smash the snot out of it. Now this hair had some colic to it, so you might not like the way this looks when I flip it around. But I'm just going to trust it and trust that my sink is going to take care of it. I might put one more tie in on there. We'll see. So you can see how fast that is, because I'm so far at the head that the angle and shaping the angle is not a consequence, right? Like I don't have to slick it back all the way. So I don't have to spend all this time in the thread component part of it. It's really, that came out really cool. I like that red. But you're just trying to get it basically a little bit past 90 at that head section, and you're good to go.
Wow, that's beautiful. I was going to say you did it so fast because you're so good at this.
There's been a lot of painful hours behind the vise doing that, that's for sure. But I think at the head, you get into that bulkhead style, and like Pop said, it's off the cuff, it's off the seat of your pants. You're just flying through it. When I do hollows, I'm very, very meticulous about the shape and the angle they're set to, and how the shape from one to the next tube joint to the next tube joint. Like, I'll take a lot of time to do the tail. Once I'm on the shank, it's just like hair, bulkhead, done. Like it's really fast. And it's because you're using the hair from the butt. And if you remember, I said this hair is very kinkable. It has so much trapped air, it's very easy to kink, but the shape is hard to control because it's very kind of weak. It's almost like it has too much trapped air to set to a proper angle. So the goal is to compress it and flare it, and then kind of get it to 90 degrees and move on. And trust that the next set of butts, which are facing backwards, are going to tame that. And then you just throw the next one on and tame it a little bit, and then move on and tame it a little bit. But it's 100% off the cuff. You just roll with the punches once you get to the head section.
So Gunnar, how many sections was this fly tonight that you tied?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the tail. Yeah, 7 for the tail. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 2 bulkheads. So 14.
Wow.
14 sections.
Awesome.
It's a good thing I prepped the tail, hey? A long fly.
Hey, David, let's come back on screen. Gunnar, unbelievable stuff.
Hour 46. I'm so sorry, guys.
No. Listen,
I told you 40 minutes. I told you 40 minutes.
You lost almost nobody, and I'm sure we'll have many, many more hundreds of people watch this on replay.
We didn't get to the first piece of thread until 28 minutes into the video tonight. So,
hey, Gunnar, will you do us a favor? You mentioned this. When we're off camera tomorrow or whenever, wet that fly and take a little video or photo of what it looks like once it's
I'll
wet.
have to shovel. It snowed today. I'll have to shovel.
My God. All right.
To take a picture.
Or drive over here and we'll put in the water here, but we're putting in your bathtub. Maybe
this is yours, right? I sent you guys the fly from tonight. This is yours, man.
Awesome.
Well, you should send it to us, but you're going to come and we'll fish it together and we'll catch some fish. So we'll figure that out.
You tell me when the stripers are on mullet, and I'll be there.
Well, they're on all sorts of big things right now. That thing will catch fish today. Well, listen, thank you so much. It's just incredible. And I know everyone's super appreciative. We lost almost nobody, despite the fact that we're almost an hour over. No one wanted to, everyone was wrapped. Everyone was out, on the edge of their seats. So thank you so much. And Anything else, David? Any other questions from you?
No, I mean, Gunnar, this is so, I mean, when Lou does most of the editing of the video, this is going to be a very easy one not to cut because every minute of everything you did had like gobs of information. And Lou and I were texting a little bit back and forth. I said, I feel like a total neophyte considering what I watched you do tonight. And I tie all the time.
Sure. You make it look incredibly easy. Thank you so much for spreading your knowledge. And we're super excited.
You have to thank Pop, man. This is all Bob Pop's. I'm just a student. I have taken that book. I have read that book front to back 10 times and spent about 7 years trying to imitate everything in it. And this is literally just Bob's book. This is me. And of course, I'm not saying Bob agrees with everything I say. Like, it's not like he's endorsing this message, but you know, like I read those techniques and I wasn't kidding when I said, if you read that book, it comes across as wisdom. It's not somebody's ideas or some theory or somebody trying to sell you this thing. It just reads as wisdom. And I just took it and ran with it. I said, holy crap, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to spend the next 7 years of my life and try to perfect it because this to me, I could fish this every day for the rest of my life. And there would be no part of me that would be like, is this right? Is this the best thing I could be doing? Is this the best imitation? Is this the right swimming action? Never once. It'd be like, this is the best cast. I have so much confidence in that system and layout. And then the Build the Beast, it just allows you to take it from the skill development of a mono, and it just says, everybody try this, right? It's like, all you need is if you have tube fly stuff, everybody can tie this. So yeah, there's a small investment up front, but
it's great. I just want to remind everybody that they should tune into your Instagram page and your YouTube channel because
Gunnar
out there is great.
Yeah, Gunnar, maybe just let people know how do they find you on Instagram, on YouTube?
Yeah, so my name's Gunnar Brammer. You can see it. The Instagram is Gunnar Brammer. The Facebook is Gunnar Brammer. The YouTube is Gunnar Brammer. I was really original with my naming there.
Awesome. And there's some incredible content. I mean, you've put amazing amount of time into
and unfortunately, they are this long. A lot of those YouTube videos are 40, 50, 60 minutes.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're amazing.
Well, thank you so much again. And Gunnar, I hope
David, I'm just glad you're here. I
hope you tune into the Mark Sadati casting video that we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I'll be there.
And
Mark and I, we call each other probably 3 or 4 times a year and catch up. And he's a very much so a mentor in both the casting and fly tying aspect. He's a really wicked cool guy.
And Mark is really cool about that. I remember one of the first times I met Mark, it's got to be like 30 years ago. And I was working for Eddie Bauer at the time, and I set up casting lessons in Central Park, and Mark came, and that was an awful lot of fun. Also, the next time we broadcast, Lou, you and I will not be on 2 separate cameras, will we?
No, we're going to be together, and we'll be with Mark, actually, the 3 of us together, and we're going to break down all of your casting. So really, really important. We're going to post this to all of our social. Mark and I filmed a video of him casting, just a regular cast using his technique this past week. We're going to ask anyone who's interested to send us videos sort of aligned to that template, and we're going to pick 5 of the videos. And Mark will do sort of a breakdown and sort of provide advice and personalized tutorial on your cast. So it should be a great session. I'm looking forward to it. I've learned a ton from Mark about casting. That guy can throw a line.
Me too. I'm afraid of what Mark's going to say about your cast and my cast.
Well, listen, maybe we'll get Gunnar's cast down there too.
Yeah, Gunnar sent your cast in. Well, at the expense of running over into the next hour, Gunnar, again, thank you very much. Lou, hi from the Bahamas.
Yeah, man. Catch more fish.
Bye.
Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you so much. What a wonderful evening. David, keep catching fish. Tom, we want to see more pictures of big bass, especially on Gunnar's flies. Take care.
Yeah, Tom and Clay, thanks so much for your support today.
We'll see you all on April 30th for Mark Sidoti in a casting clinic. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank
See you
you.
guys.
Bye.